The second Victoria 3 dev diary has been released, and while it only outlines some of the new features in very broad terms, there are some very interesting conclusions that we can draw from it. Let's take a look. First, it is interesting to see how community feedback has already impacted the development of Victoria 3. After much speculation, it was confirmed that political parties will not be featured in the game. This is a major change from the previous game, and considering how many of these struggles during the time period involved the right to vote for political parties, it is a bit odd to see this feature removed from the game. While interest groups are a creative way to represent the various desires of pops, it is hard to see how these two things can be merged into one. After all, people vote for political parties and not the interest groups that may often influence these parties. I don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, it seems like parties were removed to make things a bit more simple and accessible. The Victoria 2 player in me hates the idea, but on the other hand, if Paradox start changing the game every time there is resistance to a new feature, this could spiral the development process out of control. Martin, the game director for Victoria 3, has confirmed on Twitter that following the backlash this removal had caused, the development team is now reconsidering this decision. This is not a confirmation that political parties are back, but it seems like Paradox are keeping a close eye to community sentiment with Victoria 3. As I said in my Victoria 3 screenshot analysis video, Victoria 3 is probably going to be a very challenging game to make right for Paradox. The Victoria 2 fanbase were the most vocal minority in the Paradox community, and the hype built around a successor to their beloved game is enormous. Living up to the hype and making sure the game gives something new to players, while still being enjoyable to the old guard, must feel like being trapped in a box. Let's move on to the dev diary. First, we now have descriptions for each pop type, which is very nice because in Victoria 2 we only had labels, but to actually understand what each pop was about required watching a YouTube video, reading the game manual, or reading a game guide. Pops are now divided into two categories: workforce pops and dependents. Pops who are not allowed to work are considered dependents. It will be up to the player to turn as many pops as possible from dependents to workforce pops. An example for dependent pops are women and children. Women were not allowed to work in many countries during the 19th century, while child labor was common. So getting women to work could free up more men to serve in the army, but might also trigger unemployment. While getting the children out of the factories will allow you to educate them and increase the literacy of your population. From this screenshot, it is unclear to see how the game determines the amount of women and children in any given pop group. We can see that this pop has 6.22k dependents. How many of these are women and children, and how is that number calculated? Women's suffrage movements and child labor laws were very abstract concepts in Victoria 2 that were added more as flavor than an actual game mechanic. Perhaps in Victoria 3 both of these will become more important and engaging. In Victoria 2 your main task was to turn your huge population of farmers into laborers who would go to work in factories to produce goods needed for your country. All other pops were secondary, and some could be completely neglected, like aristocrats, clerks, and artisans. The dev diary also mentions some new pop types. Machinists is not a pop that existed in Victoria 2, and they are mentioned alongside laborers, so it's probably not a matter of just a name change. I'm not sure what this pop type is supposed to do exactly, but it is possible that machinists are a specific pop that will work in your factories that produce military goods, while laborers will work in non-military factories. Another new pop that is mentioned is shopkeepers, but these sound very much like the Victoria 2 artisans and may have a similar role. Artisans in Victoria 2 are pops that produce goods without factories. The volume of their production was obviously much smaller than factories, but I assume they were introduced to allow smaller countries that cannot build many factories to still produce some of the goods that factories produce. Seems like careful balancing will be needed to satisfy the various types of pops in Victoria 3 and their interest groups. For example, by granting women's suffrage, you could be upsetting the old order, and that might cause a rebellion. And rightfully so, it should be impossible to make everybody happy at the same time. How will this work exactly in the game? How will the AI manage to do it properly? Maybe we'll find out in the next Dev Diaries. That is it for this quick look at another Victoria 3 Dev Diary. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this helpful, give this video a like so that others can see it as well. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.